Oh hair, why must you do this to me? Hi guys, I'm Kieren from Ergo Cosplay and today I'll be bringing you my list of November favourites. I know it's been quite a while since we did the last one of these, but uni and jobs and life just sort of took over a little bit. Now that I've finished university, I can start putting more effort into actually editing the videos that we've got. We've got plenty of footage, and we can start actually working on some of the really fun and exciting ideas that we have planned. The way that we've done this in the past is that we've had a series of topics that we will sort of choose favourites that we've been watching or reading or whatever this month. But I have not been engaging in too much nerdy stuff, especially in terms of books, because university. So I've got a slightly different layout for this video, but I have some really cool stuff that I've been watching, sort of linking back to October as well, because I loved all of the spooky stuff that came out in October. So the first thing that I want to talk about is TV programs. Actually, all of these are Netflix originals. How very capitalist of me. So the first one is The Haunting of Hill House. Now if you know me at all, I love ghost stories. In fact, all of us Ergo boys are slightly obsessed with the horror genre. It's just an absolute favourite of ours. Haunting of Hill House came out in October on Netflix, and as soon as I watched the trailer I knew that it was going to be fantastic. It is fairly gory, I guess. There's some things that can potentially be triggering, including sort of mentions of suicide, a lot of death, a lot of ghosts, but there was just something that was so enthralling about the story. The story basically revolves around a little family whose last name was bear with me. So the story revolves around a family called the Cranes, and they are a family with a mother, a father, and 5 children. No, would not personally want to have 5 children. They move into a house to refurbish it, called Hill House, surprisingly. And in this house, various spooky happenings start happening. Wow, that was really good English. Nice one, Kieren. But also, the story also focuses on the children as they've grown up, as they've got their own families and their own jobs. And the oldest of the children, whose name is Stephen, becomes an author who writes about scary stories about hauntings, but he believes that he's never actually seen a ghost. Then things start happening. There's sort of, especially to the youngest daughter, Nellie, and events sort of spiral from there. It's all about the sort of trauma that they experience living in this haunted house, and the sort of later haunting of the family. So if haunted houses and ghost stories, especially ones that are so beautifully captured on film, the cinematography and the locations and the general sort of eerie vibe that the show creates is is really something. It's really something. So yeah, Haunting of Hill House, fantastic. The second TV show that I want to talk about is one that I was initially rather concerned about. As someone who grew up watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch, when I found out that Netflix was doing their reboot of the show, but basing it more closely to the original Archie comics, when I heard about the chilling adventures of Sabrina, I was initially a little bit concerned. But after watching it, concern is gone. Totally gone. It is, in fairness, nothing at all like Sabrina the Teenage Witch. But holy moly, it is rather fantastic. Again, beautifully filmed. The cinematography in all of these recent Netflix shows, especially the ones sort of based around like Halloween or spooky things, has just been incredible. The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina was just fantastic. It's basically about a young half witch, half human named Sabrina Spellman, as if the last name Spellman didn't give away that she was a witch. Anyway, so on her 16th birthday, she has to sign her name away to basically become part of this religion called the Church of Night, which is where witches sort of get their power and they become a coven. Everything about this show felt fantastically well researched, for starters. I felt like there were definitely some issues in the portrayal of Satanism and the Church of Satan, and the distinct differences between the two views that people have on them. And I know that there's been issues, but I'm not going to get into that because I could talk for hours about the issues of social media on niche religions. But the iconography, the sort of like cultist influences, the way that they used different sort of different types of witch from different cultures, including the gods and the demons, and everything about it was just very, very interesting to watch. It was just very good. I want Hilda and Zelda to actually be my aunts. I want Ambrose to be my cousin. I want a little black cat more than ever. Salem walked the red carpet. The cat that played Salem walked the red carpet at the premiere, and I just thought that was lovely. I also, weirdly, unlike me, loved the romance aspect of it. The romance between Sabrina and Harvey, which is, you know, pretty full on from the offset of the show. I didn't expect to enjoy it because I generally am not that interested in the love plots when it comes to films, but I just wanted them to be okay. It was just very good. If you haven't seen it yet, it's fantastic. I recommend it. There's a Christmas special coming out. Very excited. Third Netflix original that I want to talk about kind of leans into the anime topic, though I know that it is a Netflix original. I believe that it is actually an American production, but that is Castlevania. I have never played the Castlevania games, which is, again, not like me, because gothic stuff, vampires, big swords, kind of my general brand. But I never played the games, so I went into watching this show completely blind as to what it was about. I once got like a mini replica sword in a loot crate, but again, I didn't know what it was. I believe it's actually Alucard's sword now that I'm looking at it and I watched the show. Castlevania is an anime one of the voices, the voice of Trevor, is Richard Armitage, and this was the main reason that I watched this show. Ugh. That man has a beautiful voice, and again, much like all of the Netflix originals that I've mentioned, all of the shows that I've mentioned, it is gory. It does feature demons. It features death heavily, but it does surround the character of Dracula. Having seen many different ways that Dracula has been portrayed in the past, including sort of like knockoffs of Dracula, like Strahd and Ravenloft, and you know, watching all the films and stuff, I wasn't sure where they were going to go with this. As someone who studied a lot of Gothic literature, I'm sort of the opinion that vampires are great. You can't do too much with Dracula anymore, though. It's kind of been done. Well done, Bram Stoker, for making such a fantastic character, but let's just leave him in his coffin. Let's just leave him alone for a bit. My opinion on this was changed in Castlevania, because Dracula's not really in it that much, at least in the first season. He's in it a lot. He's the main character, but it actually focuses more on the themes of being a vampire and of hating mortals and of hating humanity. And I thought it was a very interesting commentary on this sort of, I'm going to have to call it medieval because it's not really in a time frame, but this medieval like opinion of witchcraft, this medieval opinion of like occult worship, and of basically just being afraid of everything. And as a historian, I find that very interesting to be watching in an anime that's about Dracula. The basic storyline revolves around the fact that Dracula falls in love with a mortal woman who he trains to become a doctor. Her name is Lisa. He falls in love with her, he marries her, he trains to be a doctor, they have a son, and then the Inquisition of the church decides that because she is a doctor, she's a witch, and thus burns her at the stake when Dracula's not there. Dracula then sets out to enact his revenge on humanity by basically killing them all. Very much enjoyed it. Me and Dimitri are definitely not planning a cosplay from it already. The next topic that I want to talk about is comic books. Recently, I went to a Gothic conference at Sheffield University called Reimagining the Gothic, and there I had the absolute honour of listening to a talk by Kieren, who, if you remember my January favourites video, I spoke about Dr. Aphra. He is the author of that series, of the Darth Vader series. He's written for the Young Avengers series. He's written for practically every Marvel superhero ever. He's just a fantastic writer, and he was talking about the influences of specifically vampires, but also just other Gothic influences on his writing and on himself as a comic book writer. And through this talk, I then discovered one of his more recent comics called The Wicked and the Divine. The Wicked and the Divine, the narrative is about a girl called Laura, I believe. Yes, Laura. And she meets a group of 12 others who are actually a pantheon of reincarnated gods. Yeah. There's basically this cycle of existence for the gods, where once every 90 years they are reincarnated into a mortal, and they have 2 years to live after they've discovered that they are actually reincarnated deities. The gods are from various different pantheons from various cultures. There's my foot is numb. The gods from various pantheons throughout different cultures. Those are including Greek. They include Egyptian, and loads of others. I'm talking just a lot about goth stuff. Like, I miss October, and I wish I'd done my October favourites. This is basically an October favourites. There's some great girls. That always sort of wins a comic for me if there's fantastic female characters, and indeed there's also fantastic male characters, etc. All of the characters are great, basically, and after listening to Kieren Gillen, I was already a massive fan of his writing, but after listening to him talk about his process as a writer, I have so much more respect for him as both a person and an author. And after reading this comic, having known a bit more about why he wrote this comic, or like his influences, and the way that his influences are actually very similar to my influences, I was actually then very excited to read this comic. And yeah, wow, it's good. The art is by Jamie McKelvey, who actually has worked with Kieren Gillen for, oh dear, spilt my tea. The artist of this comic is Jamie McKelvey, who has worked very closely with Kieren Gillen on loads of things. So they had this very sort of really interesting and like awesome dynamic as writer and artist, where their stories just flow, and yeah, I'm just a massive fan. So that's The Wicked and the Divine. The next comic that I've been reading is Uzumaki by Junji Ito, who I actually stumbled across after watching a YouTube video about how the media scares us. It's a really interesting YouTube video, I'll link it down below. But after watching that, I thought, I'll give some of this a read. And I did. And if you're into surreal horror in comics, it's a bit gory, but is also really clever, and also kind of like Lovecraftian, and there's arguably like eldritch abominations, but also like a lot of body horror and all that sort of great stuff that Japanese writers are very good at. Ito is the best, in my opinion, at achieving this. He is even so good that he can do he can carry off jump scares in a comic book. The comic that I've been reading is Uzumaki, and it's a series of various stories that are all set in the same town, and the basic premise is that this town becomes obsessed with a pattern of spirals, and this affects them in various different ways, to the point where their basic human anatomy is changed. Like, for example, one person literally turns into a snail with the spiral shell. But I think the best part about it for any horror fan is that it's so scary to the point of terror because nothing is explained. And I am all for, you know, your classic horror where you've got a zombie and it will jump out and it will make you go, ha! And nobody would react like that in real life. Yeah, where you get a jump scare and it's a scary premise, but in the end, the good guys win and the big bad dies, and yeah. But the beauty of these comics is that doesn't happen. There is no logical reason why these things are happening, and yet they're happening, and that's what makes them scary, because as humans we actually have no way to do anything about it, and it's almost like humanity is just this little dot that doesn't really matter. That was very existential of me, but that's basically why it's so scary. Again, if you watch this video on how media scares us, it explains it in a little bit more detail. But I just think that's the most enthralling thing for horror comics. Moving on to my final section of this group of favourites. Oh no, my penultimate section of this group of favourites is games. Now, again, I'm going to mention, just because I've been playing it a lot, is that I finally got Overwatch, and yeah, it's taken over my life, but I'm not going to talk about it any more than that. The official first game that I want to talk about is a game called Graveyard Keeper. Now, if you like things like Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing, if you like, what's the other one that DMITRI likes? Harvest Moon, that sort of thing, you'll like this game. And it has the addition of being spooky. The basic premise of it is that you are a guy who has somehow travelled into this past time, other dimension maybe? And there is a creepy church, and you are told that you have to be the keeper of the graveyard. And in that you then have to sort of perform autopsies and sell human flesh to the local pub and make the graveyard pretty and talk to all of these really interesting characters that live in the town and burn witches. It's the stake. Yeah, that makes it sound really good. Yeah, you should go and play this game that's about murder. That aside, it's really cute. It is very similar to Stardew Valley in its sort of aesthetic, but obviously it's spooky. And yeah, it's just a really cute little like 2D like town organising game. It's very relaxing, but also it's really funny. I played hours and hours of it, and if you're the sort of person that likes a game that you can sort of go, today I'm going to cut down some trees so I get enough wood to be able to make some gravestones to then make my graveyard look pretty, this is the game for you. The next two games I'm going to talk about are actually apps. The first game is just a little like cookie clicker game that both me and DMITRI have been playing, and it's really calming and nice. And if I'm feeling anxious, I just like put it on. But also it helps because it means that I can be like really pedantic. And it's called Terrarium, and it's basically just a cookie clicker where you earn enough oxygen to level up your little plants and grow more plants. And when I say I'm really pedantic about it, what I mean is I won't plant a new plant until the plant that I just planted has reached level 50, because that is the max level. Yeah, so I do that. Not really the way you're supposed to play it, but yeah, I just love little mindless cookie clicker games, and I don't know, if you're a person that is as stressed as I am, sometimes it's nice to have a mindless cookie clicker game where you grow some happy little plants. And the final game app that I want to talk to you about is called Underhand. This game is a single player card game where you are a cult leader. And the basic premise is that you have a hand of cards that show you what sort of supplies you have, so whether that's relics, cultists, food, prisoners, money. You have it in a hand, and the basic premise is that you are given little sort of events that happen, and you have to use your hand to then appease a god. I'm sorry, there's been men collecting outside my house. Hello. So you use your hand of cards to appease a god, basically an evil cult god. There's been a running theme for all of these games and all of these books and TV shows, and that seems to be that I'm making myself look like a cultist. It's a great game. It's very aesthetically pleasing. The music is fantastic. It gives off a creepy vibe that almost reminds me of Night Vale. Even if it's sort of like an old worldy kind of cult tarot-y looking game. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but when you play it, you'll understand. There's snippets of like a radio broadcast in there, and I think that's why it reminds me of Night Vale. But it's just this little bizarre world that really reminds me of Night Vale. And we've reached the last topic of my November favourites, and that is the cosplay that I'm most excited about for the future. Now, this costume is one that I have wanted to do for years and years and years. Basically since the first Hobbit film came out. And after equally years of convincing the boys, we finally decided on which dwarves we're gonna cosplay. Let's be real, DMITRI was always gonna be Thorin. But now that Scott and I have discovered that we are the perfect, evil, mischievous, annoying twin dynamic, we have opted with Feely and Keely, with myself being Feely and Scott being Keely, and I am so excited to start making this costume. However, I'm not excited for the amount of weapons that Keely has. It's just unnecessary. He's like you know, in the DreamWorks film Sinbad, where there's like the guy and they're like going into the party and he has to take all of his weapons off, and he's like there unloading himself. That's what I'm imagining Keely now that I've done the research and realised how many weapons this dude is carrying on him. He has 4 tiny hand axes on his shoes. Why? So thank you so much for watching my November favourites video. I hope that's given you some inspiration into going and apparently only watching, reading, playing goth things. I've been Kieren, we are Ergo Cosplay, and until next month, stay groovy. I'm a big fan.